So after the war, you were sent to Van Nuys to finish up your time.
Yeah.
And when were you finally discharged?
I stayed in the Army, made a career out of it. From Van Nuys, I was assigned to Adak, Alaska. I was the surgeon for that area. I was a surgeon for what's called the Aleutian sector, which included the time Adak and that whole Aleutian chain. And then I had applied to specialize in internal medicine because I didn't want to go into general practice. And the Army had a program that they'd give you a year, for every year of training you got, but you had to pay them back for the same period of time. Well, internal medicine was 3 years, and I had to pay them back 3 years, so there was 6 years. And I'd already had about 4 years in, so I had about 10 years of service.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to remain in the Army, so I made a career out of the Army.
And did your wife join you up there in Alaska?
Yes.
And after Alaska, then where did you go again?
Oh, from Alaska, well, I'll say then I came down for my training, residency training, and I was assigned to Denver, and then I spent my first year of training there, and then they transferred me out to Letterman Army Hospital in San Francisco. And from there, when I finished my training, I was sent as chief of medicine to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And from Fort Leonard Wood, I get back on track now. From Fort Leonard Wood, I knew I had to go overseas, and my wife really was kind of unhappy. And Fort Leonard Wood at that time wasn't a very good place to be. You burn coal, and housing wasn't very good. And so I went to the Surgeon General's office and see what they had in mind for me. Plus, I thought I might be sent to someplace where I could think of my family. And they said, well, I tell you, they got a job. They have a request from a government agency that I might be interested in. They said, because we know that you can take your family with you, and it's a pretty good assignment. But they wouldn't tell me what it was. But they said, here, if you go down and have an interview with these people. Well, it turned out it was the CIA. And so I went with CIA, and I was what they call their senior Far East medical representative for Southeast Asia, all of Asia, matter of fact. Covered all the way from Japan, Korea, south, Formosa, Philippines, Hong Kong, gone as far as Nazarbayev. And actually, when I first went over there, I was stationed in Japan for the first year about. And then they moved us down to Okinawa, where they made it what's called a big support base down there. And I was so then another about 2 years I was in Okinawa. And then came back to the States and stayed another year in Washington with the CIA. And then I was assigned to Canada as called a representative for the United States medical army, medical people in Canada. I was a liaison officer basically between the Canadian people and the U.S. people, that is the medical aspects of it. And from there, Finished that tour, went to Germany and spent 4 years in Germany. Then I retired.
And how did you get to Fresno?
Well, when I got ready to retire, I knew I wanted to come back to California. And originally I thought I'd probably go back to my hometown of Riverside. But when we came back, Riverside by that time had grown so much and it was so crowded down there and so smoggy, we decided against it. And there was an opening up here in Madera for a health officer. And I said, well, gee, maybe that sounds maybe interesting. So I started up here. Well, as it turned out, that job really didn't open up. But when I arrived there, they said, look, there's a health officer in Fresno that heard about you and he'd be interested. So I went to see a guy with him, Dr. DeFries here in Fresno, and decided to go with him. So I went with the health department. And I was with the health department, Fresno Health Department for about a year, for about 4 or 5 years. And then went with the state health department here in town.
And you've been here ever since?
Been here ever since.
So you're one of those where they say that phrase, join the Army and see the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, a living example.
Yeah, the Army was good to me, and we enjoyed our entire time in the Army. Yeah, and we saw a lot of the world. Had good assignments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some of these anecdotes that we've been hearing about in Camp Hale and the mules, what did they do to them? The severing or something of the...
Apparently they severed their vocal cords, so that to keep them quiet, I guess, so the Germans wouldn't be aware of them if they were around. So that's when I began to realize they were going to send us overseas because they were severing the vocal cords.
And then in Italy, I know the mules may not have, those mules may not have arrived, but there were some with the Alpini. And did you meet many Alpini?
Oh, quite a few, because when we would have to leave our vehicles behind, we'd still have to get our supplies and our aid station equipment up, and so we'd get a hold of the Alpini troops. They'd load them on their little donkeys. They're much smaller than the mules, of course, but they'd load those things up and transport them up for us. So I saw quite a few of the Alpini troops.
You also mentioned that in some of the aid stations you were in houses. Did you ever get to know the residents, the Italian residents, or?
Yes, yeah. I don't, again, I can't recall specific cases, but yes, yeah, because usually most of the Italian homes are built, as I say, they're all put in their 3 or 4 story buildings. And usually the bottom floor, first story, is where the animals stay. And then they live in the upper stories. Mm-hmm. And that worked perfectly for us because we could set up our aid station in the bottom floor of the thing. And so the families would still live in the homes, you and displaced families. So, pleasant.
Now, being in the aid station, you see the unpleasantness of war. How did you separate your feelings from your duty? Or could you?
Well, of course, with the Italian people, there wasn't any problem. The Krauts, you get pretty much upset with them. When I say upset, because they were killing our people. And, but really, as human beings, as I say, when they needed treatment, I personally didn't feel like I discriminated against the Germans anymore. I mean, at all, from a treatment standpoint.
Was there any day or days that just really you just saw a tremendous amount of casualties that stands out, or?
There's certain, but again, I can't be, a war, but I just can't remember specific times. Oh yeah, there were times when you were just inundated with casualties. But that's it. That's where if I kept a diary of some sort, why I could remember, but no, I can't remember. Like specific towns, I don't remember the actual towns much. Yeah.
And then you mentioned triage, that when the soldiers would come in.
Yeah.
How did that triage work? Or
Well, the minute you'd see the patient, you can casually, you can actually examine them, and just dependent upon how severe they were. If they were in shock, well, then of course at first right away you say, because you had your medical technicians, surgical technicians with you, you could right away start giving them plasma and this type of thing. If they were bleeding profusely in a big wound, why you pack that wound, and the ones who required immediate attention got it first, and then the ones who required to get them out of there for evacuation, we tried to, more seriously, they were gotten out as soon as, the ambulances stuff, we'd get them loaded in those ambulances first. Mm-hmm.
did many of the soldiers that were wounded there, will they talk to you or talk to the medical people there, and you know, you hear these, see these movies and things of, you know, asking for their mom, or you know, tell this to my family back home, or do you recall?
That wasn't my experience. No, that wasn't my experience. I saw a good many soldiers who were scared to death and crying, but no, I can't say that I heard much of that. No.
And have you had ever the occasion to meet up with any soldiers that you might have treated since the war?
Several times. I have, yes. When there was a guy who ran a grocery store down in Riverside, and of course my relatives lived when we moved up here, and I go down there quite a bit. And there was a guy in a grocery store down there that always remembered me. He told me, and also strange as it may seem, a couple of high school reunions I've gone to. I ran across a couple of guys who claimed I treated them. Tell you, I didn't remember them, and I've had people write me that I don't know at all, but they're trying to claim disability, and they said I treated them. They apparently to justify their claim, they had that statement. But again, I just don't remember. I don't remember any of these people I actually treated.
Mm-hmm. So you probably saw quite a few, and you were
sure.
just doing your duty and.
Oh yes, you'd see. Maybe you wouldn't see any a day. Another time you'd see a couple of hundred of them.
Now, being part of the 10th, were there any just memories about just being with these 10th guys that stand out, or that they had their own camaraderie, so to speak, as did probably other companies? But is there anything that you call about the 10th and their camaraderie, or?
Well, I say certainly maybe awfully close friends, and I remember they loved to sing. I remember that one thing about them. A lot of them knew a lot of these old 10th Mountain songs, like 90 pounds of rucksack and this song, and the Alpini songs some of them used to sing. And I was fortunate from this Rupert von Trapp, because he was a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other guys in my outfit had some training, and they used to get together and sing these songs and other songs. Yeah, really, I think singing, partying was what I remembered with. I mean, as being close.
Yeah, they did sing a lot, and so that would be something.
Now there was I think, time that when we were up in, say this is when we were in the occupation area around Yugoslavia. Why, one day we were in a tremendous bang and a boom, and couldn't figure out what that was, and it turned out that the regimental surgeon had gone and was in the house, one of these 4-story buildings, and he'd gone up to the bathroom and the toilet, and he apparently had sat in the toilet, and then in those times you say to flush the toilets, of course there wasn't any running water, so you had a jerry can, full of water you'd pour to flush the thing. Well, apparently when he went to flush it, he picked up the wrong can that was full of gasoline. I'm not sure it was gasoline or kerosene, but it was gasoline. And then he lit a cigarette and blew the toilet all to pieces. Because all these pipes for these houses all ran outside. And it just blew all the pipes off the outside. And it went down to sort of a manure pile, and blew the manure pile all up too.
Yeah, you have those, war isn't always tragic and sad. It has those anecdotes.
Yeah.
Any other anecdotes you can recall? Your time over there?
No, not offhand. No, I really can't. No.
Anything else that you may have heard that you want to include, or that?
I'm just trying. I know. Well, you mentioned that people treated you well by feeding you, or offering to feed you. Some of the people you met. I don't know if that was specifically in Italy, or in Austria, but you would have good coffee sometimes. People that were thankful would offer you.
Well, yeah, when you go through these villages, they'd offer you wine, as I say, mainly vegetables, and once in a while cheese. They used to cure I don't know, I guess they hid it from the Germans. They'd not bury the cheese in these manure piles of theirs, but I don't know if that's had something to do with curing the cheese, or whether it was to hide it from that. I don't know. But they got cheese from these manure piles, I remember, and give you some of that.
I know what I want to ask. Some of the Italians, like if the Italians had helped you in some way by letting you set up aid stations, did they ever suffer any repercussions? Did you worry about that?
No, because the Germans weren't going to come back to, we were pushing the Germans ahead. I don't know, I suppose it might have been different if it had been the other way, where the Germans were coming back to that area. But that wasn't never a concern.
But they were welcoming. The Italians were eager.
Yes. Yeah, no, they were, most of them were happy-go-lucky people.
And could you help them with food items sometimes?
Oh yeah, sure, we'd give them sea rations and Sure. Oh.
Maybe medical care sometimes?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I treated quite a few Italian people, I mean civilians. Matter of fact, I even treated when we were up in that occupation area with the Yugoslavian, even those troops I was called on a couple of times. People who were, they didn't have antibiotics I mean, they were short of them. And I was asked to see quite a few of the Yugoslavian troops.
Okay, now, I have another question here. Someone you met up in Sacramento, I believe that was 4 years ago, you had treated him? You got together, he hasn't been able to attend any of the luncheons
Well,
lately.
that was my medical administrative officer, Aldrich. He was the one that shot up, trying to bring the vehicles up to me. Young, he was an interesting guy. As I say, he was golf. He was going to be a golf pro, and apparently he was a good golfer. And then when he got, was trying to bring the vehicles up to me, why he ran across the pocket of German, and he climbed under the Jeep. Why he climbed under the Jeep, I don't know, but he did. And he got it, and shot his hip all up. And of course, I took care of any chance to become a golf pro because he just never could hit the ball worth it.
And then in Monterey, last February, you came in contact with Myrna.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Well, she was Colonel Hampton's daughter. Yeah.
And you treated him.
Yeah, you're right. Colonel Hampton was wounded. Again, I don't remember what area it was. And he actually he walked into the aid station. He had shrapnel wounds of the leg and I think a knee. But of course we had to evacuate him because it was his knee primarily was involved. Yeah, and as I told Myrna that I'll never forget the only thing that ever worried him when he got in there was he said he had field glasses now, these big powerful ones, but he was worried that his executive officer wouldn't get those. He wanted me to be sure that his executive officer got those field glasses. That's the only thing I remember about old Colonel Hampton.
Now, you guys were called, or have been called, I know Tom Brokaw, I think, may have coined the phrase, the greatest generation, for what you played a part during that war and that all of you did. How do you respond, or what do you think about that term referred to in you guys as the greatest generation?
Why? I don't personally feel that, I mean, we went through a lot, but every generation goes through a lot. To me, I don't think our generation went through anything more than your generation or any generation. I mean, yeah, it's nice of them, nice of people to feel that way, but I don't really feel that our generation had any more trials and tribulations than any other groups.
And in looking back and being one of the survivors of the war, and how would you just, sum up just your time in the service? Particularly during the World War II time, because I know you had an extended career after that. How would you kind of sum up your time during World War II?
Well, I can't say I enjoyed it, certainly, but certainly I feel that it was an experience that I treasure with all the people I met, the things I saw. I was fortunate to get through it without being wounded, and I just feel that it's just a good experience.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there.